Bé, començaria amb una pregunta. Perdó. Gustau Castanyer. En tot cas, identifiqueu-vos, sisplau.
Gustau Castanyer, treballant als arxius del Consell de la Unió Europea. És una pregunta per Trudy Peterson. Quina és l'opinió que li mereix la manera que s'han gestionat els arxius criminals del Tribunal Criminal de Iugoslàvia i de Ruanda amb el mecanisme residual de Nacions Unides que s'acaba de crear? Simplement la seva opinió.
The Tribunal for Yugoslavia and the Tribunal for Rwanda were created by the United Nations Security Council acting under their peacekeeping powers. I think there's absolutely no question that these are UN records. The UN has created what's called the residual mechanism, which is supposed to exist after the tribunal's end to deal with continuing matters. For example, someone who's been convicted appeals to get out early to go home and die with his family, that sort of thing. In the case of Rwanda, there are still people who have not been apprehended, and so you might have to set up a tribunal again, and things like this. But an important part of the residual mechanism will be to manage the tribunal's records. The Yugoslav records will be in The Hague, Rwanda's records in Arusha. Whether or not that's a permanent situation is hard to know. Certainly, an African Union resolution recently said that the records of the Rwanda tribunal need to be physically in Rwanda. The question, of course, becomes the security of the materials. The Yugoslav case is a little more complicated, and I was just at a meeting on this last week. What is going on right now is that the publicly available material, and remember, an important part of the tribunal's work is in closed session, where you have witnesses that must be protected. And of course, the records of the prosecutor and the personal records of the judges are also not public. But you have the public record of the court session. The tribunal has offered to make copies of that and give copies to a government institution in Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia. I believe Macedonia has said they don't want one. Bosnia does, and Croatia, it's very complicated because right now the governments are deciding whether they wish to do this or not. Meanwhile, that record is also on the internet. So that is going to be maintained by the residual mechanism. So the position right now is that the original records for Yugoslavia will stay in The Hague. The website with the publicly available will continue to be maintained, and the governments have been offered mass copies if they want it. I think that's about as good a solution as we can deal with right now. It will be very interesting to watch and see whether the governments really do want these copies, want to have information centers that could be used as a center for looking at the history or not. And we just don't know yet.
Bueno, bé, jo tinc una pregunta pel senyor Boel. No m'ha quedat clar o com... No se sent? Ara? Ara? No m'ha quedat clar com es seleccionen i qui tria els documents de la memòria del món, de la memòria documental del món. Si podria explicar una mica més sobre aquest tema.
Yes, thank you for the question. The proposals for including a documentary heritage in the memory of the world can come from anybody. This is a specific characteristic of that program, that it doesn't have to be governments, and it is even possible for people in Catalonia to propose documentary heritage from Greece, for instance. I mean, you can propose come up with joint projects as well. So this is for the proposals. They can come from different parties, but normally what will happen is that the proposals will go through national commissions. So they will go through a recommendation process before they come to UNESCO. At UNESCO, there is an independent and intergovernmental committee that recommends the selection, and then the final decision is taken by the Director General of UNESCO. The restriction is that there can only be 2 proposals for each round per country. However, it is possible to come up with an unlimited number of joint projects, in fact. We talked about shared heritage, and it is possible, if there is an interest, it is possible for archival institutions, for example, to get together on a theme, a topic, or a collection that they share, maybe, where they have different parts, and together make a proposal. And this is something very interesting. For instance, there is currently an example of literary archives who are, as it is said, in the diaspora, I mean dispersed literary archives, often from, but not necessarily, but often from exiled writers, but in any case writers who have left traces in different collections, and maybe none at all in the country they originally came from. So the idea is that different institutions go together and propose to the body, the Intergovernmental Committee of the Memory of the World, that will then go through it and make the final recommendation to the Director General. And this is a process that takes place every 2 years. As I said, the next meeting of this Intergovernmental Committee, this international committee, will take place in June.
Gràcies.
Hola, soc Enric Forte i li volia fer la pregunta a la Trudy Peterson. A mi m'agradaria saber quina és l'opinió que té al respecte sobre tot aquest tema que últimament ha sortit a les notícies sobre Rafael Videla i la dictadura argentina i sobre els nens robats. M'agradaria saber la teva opinió si s'han acomplert els punts que has dit sobre l'ús dels arxius per a la localització de persones i els registres mèdics per l'ADN que les abueles de Madre Maya estan fent servir i la teva visió. Gràcies.
I happened to be with an Argentine friend when we learned that Videla was dead. And she was getting it on her phone. And she read me one of the things that a woman who's a member of the Mothers of the Plaza de Mayo had written. And she said something like, at least Videla can't take the archives with him in his coffin. And so I think what we will see is the process going on in Argentina. Obviously, he was not held accountable for everything. I don't know enough about the precise process that's being used on the stolen children. I do have a great deal of respect for Memoria Abierta in Argentina, who has worked with the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo and has done extraordinary work on documenting what happened during the dictatorship. For example, they have done mapping of where the sites of detention were in a way that's just really unusual and extraordinary. So I have a lot of confidence that Argentina is indeed going in the right direction, but I can't tell you whether they're there or not. They've had a truth commission, they've had trials, so on. But I love the idea that Videla can't take the archives with him in his coffin. That's great.